Welcome to this special episode of Create Tomorrow. This episode falls out of the loop of our normal schedule because we normally introduce an episode every other Tuesday, but this time it's all about us and the work of trend forecasting. I'm Lisa White, Director of Strategic Forecasting at WGSN. And up until now, Create Tomorrow, this podcast has normally been shared between many hosts as different people from various parts of the company have taken turns bringing their points of view. But from next episode and forwards, this podcast will have a new permanent host. And that is you, Cassandra Napoli, my colleague from New York and Head of Events and Marketing here at WGSN. Welcome, Cassandra.
Hi, thank you.
So, your podcasts have been some of my favorites. So having you as our permanent host will be really, really inspiring. So I've got a few questions for you, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
So first of all, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? I'm sure that some of our listeners already know you since you've been both host and guest quite a few times, but please give us a short intro.
Yeah, so my name is Cassandra Napoli. I have been with WGSN nearly a decade, and I basically cover all things generational and digital futures. Many people may be saying, what does that mean exactly? Basically, how I put it is my work mostly looks at the sort of evolving nature of human connection and how digital media and technology are reshaping consumer identities, emotions, and lifestyles.
So that makes you the perfect person to be hosting this podcast. What are you hoping to bring to our listeners at Create Tomorrow?
Yeah, I'm mostly looking forward to having some great conversations with really amazing guests, both internally and externally. When we were replanning the relaunch of this podcast, we really wanted to go back to the title, Create Tomorrow, and take another look at what that means exactly. So we're really going to be expanding beyond just product design and looking at how consumers are also creating tomorrow, whether that's through product innovations or through actions or maybe their online behaviors. We've really expanded what it means to create tomorrow and looked at who gets to create tomorrow. And I'm excited to have our listeners along for the ride.
Before we go into a little bit more about what you want to do with Create Tomorrow, I wanted to ask you a little bit about trend forecasting in general and how you got into trend forecasting. So how did it all begin for you?
Yeah, it was really serendipitous how I discovered trend forecasting and WGSN, actually. So I went to university at the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York. As students, we had access to WGSN. So I had known about it. I had taken a couple of trend courses. But when I was a junior, I studied abroad and we did a class trip to the WGSN headquarters in London. And that's where I became really interested in seeing this as a potential career. And I eventually landed a street style internship back in New York when I was a senior. So I was essentially the person that was tasked with going to take pictures of interesting people around the city and outside of Fashion Week or down in Soho, and did a bit of fashion writing as well for WGSN at the time. And that was really my first entry point into trend forecasting. And then after graduation, I worked a little bit in publishing at Condé Nast, but soon after returned to WGSN as an assistant editor. And I've been here ever since. And that was about 9 years ago.
And what was it that first drew you to trend forecasting? When you came into WGSN, you had that sort of aha moment based on your studies and your personal interest. What was it that gave you that sort of light bulb moment that this is what you wanted to do?
Well, I've always sort of been interested in the why behind things and questions like, why do we operate this way? Why is it done that way? Why has something emerged in culture? Why has it gone viral? Why is it trending? And being a trend forecaster really allows you to answer and explore those questions, explore those curiosities. We actually always say on the team that being a trend forecaster requires you to basically have a curious mind. And I really stand behind that. I think being able to not only signal map, but then connect the dots of those signals amongst trends, past, present, and future really is such this rewarding process for me and allows me to really make sense of the world and culture and all of its many complexities along the way.
Yeah, because the why is always changing too. So you have to be somebody who loves change. And so do you love change?
Yes. I think I can embrace change. I think change is definitely a scary thing, like many people feel. The fear of the unknown is a little bit of a universal factor, right? We all kind of fear that. But I think trend forecasting is really unique in the sense that you can kind of figure out where things are going based on our methodology, based on signal mapping, based on years of experience. And that's kind of what I love most about being a trend forecaster. I kind of feel like I've got this sort of early window into where things are going.
Exactly. And I mean, The hard thing, though, is trying to explain what you do to other people. So when you're introduced to somebody at a conference or even at a dinner party, and they ask you what you do for a living, how do you explain it in that sort of boilerplate, 1 minute that you've got?
That is the golden question. It can be so difficult to figure out how to explain it to people. I feel like I'm still explaining it to my parents 9 years later, exactly what I do for a living. But how I generally sum it up is that I study shifts, signals, movements, etc., happening across 6 major pillars. So that's society, technology, the environment, politics, industry, and creativity, which is our STEPIC methodology at WGSN. And doing this really helps me to anticipate signals of change, answer lots of pivotal questions, and actually highlight possible futures for the short, the medium, and the long term. So there are lots of other elements that go into this from a social science perspective, sociology, anthropology. But essentially, it's my job to understand how consumers will think, feel, behave in the future to really help brands who are our readers make sense of it all and to future-proof their businesses in anticipation.
Yeah, and that's always, that was about a minute and a half, so that's actually perfect. And I've got a question for you too, because back when I started trend forecasting in the 1990s, the only way to learn it was to do it. So one started image researching, cutting fabric samples at a trend forecasting company, and listening to all of the accomplished trend forecasters argue over which shade of blue it should be for next season. And it was really interesting at the time, but you couldn't learn it anywhere. But you actually teach trend forecasting at a university in New York. And I'd kind of like to know from you, what is the most important thing you teach your students about trend forecasting?
Yeah, so I've been teaching trend forecasting for a couple of years, maybe like 4 years now at the undergraduate level at a university in New York. And I really love it because I think the students sort of walk into my class not really understanding what trend forecasting means, perhaps not really being that interested in what I have to say. And then slowly each week I watch their interests sort of grow as I share examples or I assign, different topics or assignments to them. And I watched their minds sort of expand by the end of the semester. And a few students every semester will always walk away wanting to actually work in trend in some way. And I think that's the most rewarding thing for me because I sort of helped shape that dream. But in terms of the most important lesson, I think it's this ability to question things, to think creatively and critically, which I think is so important in trend forecasting, right? I think you and I often write about the importance of things like strategic imagination and adopting Vujade mindsets, Lisa. So that is thinking about something in a new light from a fresh perspective. And it's something I try to pass on to my students. It's about questioning things, really having that innate curiosity and unlocking the power of creative thinking to actually solve problems or to sort of connect the dots and connect those signals.
What is the most interesting, trend, would you say? It could be a recent trend that you're seeing right now, or it could be a trend that you've been seeing evolve over 10 years or 5 years, whatever it might be.
One that I've been watching, it's not necessarily a trend, it's more of a group of people I've been watching that I'm really excited about because 2025 is just a few months away now, is Generation Beta. So Generation Beta is set to be born between 2025 and 2040. And they're going to be born into a world that's, really plagued by a truth dilemma, privacy crisis, sort of this reconfiguration of work and play at the hands of technology. And so these are the kids of a chronically online generation known as Gen Z, and they'll be the first group to really operate AI first, which is going to change everything about how they live, learn, work, and play. And I think it's going to be really exciting to see how that shapes.
Exactly. What do we need to know about you from a personal perspective? What is the backstories about what makes Cassandra Cassandra?
That's such a hard question. I think the interesting thing about being a trend forecaster, you could probably agree, is that you're never really turning your mind off, right? So I'm just going about my day, going for a run, watching, Netflix, scrolling mindlessly. And I've just signed up for another run. I've been telling you about these half marathons I've been doing. So that's what I spend a lot of time doing, is working out. I just got back from a week in Portugal with my boyfriend, and we were traveling on a motorcycle, which was really fun. So that's what Cassandra does outside of work, I guess.
You're talking about listening to Netflix or watching Netflix, I should say. What are you watching now?
Yeah, I actually hate this question because I am somebody who will like watch a show and I won't finish it. I'm terrible at binging.
I wonder if that is something that's linked to trend forecasting though, because I'm the same way. I will go and I'll watch one or two episodes. So yeah, I know what this is about now. I get the vibe. I get, what's going on. I get why people are enjoying it, but then I need to try this and I need to try this.
What's interesting about that actually is I actually never watched Euphoria, but I know a lot about Euphoria and I've seen a lot of Euphoria because I see clips on TikTok. And so that's kind of how I'll watch shows in some ways, which I think is really weird and very difficult to explain to somebody, but like know exactly what somebody's talking about and I can become a part of the conversation because I've seen clips out of context, random clips that are thrown onto TikTok, but that's generally how I watch a lot of television shows.
Let's go back to the podcast. So who is going to be your guest in the first episode and what is it about?
Yeah, so we're going to have both internal and external guests as the podcast launches, but our first episode is with two very special internal guests, our youth experts internally. That's Liz Tan from WGSN Insight and Mia Jacobs from WGSN Fashion. And the topic we're going to be discussing is language. So I don't want to give too much away, but we'll be exploring sort of how the accelerated trend cycle online has redefined youth vernacular, the rise of if you know pop cultural slang, and interestingly, the fact that we're currently in the midst of a sort of generational changing of the guard. So what that means is that the internet that Gen Z inherited from their millennial counterparts is very much not the same internet that Gen Alpha is now inheriting and growing up on. This group of now tweens and teens believe it. They have their own unique language that's pushing even Gen Z to feel old. So you can imagine how the rest of us feel if Gen Z is feeling old. But more on that in the first episode. I think Liz Tan can probably give a better, more articulate answer to that.
That's going to be an amazing episode because I think all three of you are so articulate and fun. People definitely need to listen to that one. So my last question for you, as host or hostess of Create Tomorrow, what are you looking forward to the most?
Yeah, I think I'm most excited to just get started and have exciting and hopefully very interesting and meaningful conversations with a range of guests, both in and outside the business. But I'm actually very excited for the conversations with our coworkers, right? I think what makes WGSN so unique is its people. It's really what I love most about working here because we're surrounded by so many global experts located in all corners of the planet who have very distinct expertise. And I think just being able to showcase that in a way that really allows them to shine is what I'm really excited. And I'm excited for our listeners to meet them.
Well, I'm excited too. So thank you so much, Cassandra. And I'm looking forward to having you taking on this role. So for all of you who are listening, the first Create Tomorrow episode with Cassandra Napoli will be out on December 3rd. Don't miss it.